Today we have as our guest Naushabah Khan, who is a long-standing Labour Party councillor and Medway Council and representing Gillingham South. I would like to ask Naushabah a few questions with regards to her journey into politics and why she felt it is important for her to enter the field of politics, and her message for women folk out there in terms of why women representation is important. Welcome, Naushabah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. As I was saying, could you kindly give us a brief outline as to your interest in politics as well as how you entered politics?
Yes, so I have always probably been interested in politics since I can remember. I remember my dad was very into politics and he was one of my big inspirations, and as a child we used to watch the election results in together. I don't think many children did that, but I was one of the ones that did. So I've always, as far as I can remember, been really interested in the world, what's happening in it, how we can change it. But I think in terms of wanting to stand as a politician and actually get really involved, and particularly becoming a Labour politician, for me that came, I grew up in Medway. I came from a very poor background and I saw the challenges around me, and what I also noticed is that politics makes a difference in people's lives. So when Labour came into power, the changes that meant for my family meant that I could be the first person to go to university, and it was transformational. And I recognised the power of politics in transforming our communities. And for me, I moved back to Medway after I'd finished university, and I thought, how can I make the biggest difference here? Because I still see some of those challenges in our community today. How can I make the biggest difference? And naturally for me that was through politics, because I understood and saw that's how we make change. I joined the Labour Party whilst at university, taking on the BNP, who had won an election in Birmingham, and that's when I really started to recognise the need for people to put themselves forward. But in terms of getting involved in Medway was when I moved back home.
And what do you feel still needs to change to have more women at the political leadership table?
Everything needs to change in terms of getting more women in all powers and all positions. I'm a really strong advocate for women's rights. I'm a really strong feminist, and I think our politics does need to fundamentally make that space for women. I think there are a few things that we need to look at. So first of all, culturally, there is still quite a toxic environment at times within politics, which does put a lot of people off, but I think it is more targeted towards women, and that is something we have to accept and try to change. I think the way our politics works in terms of the expectations on time can sometimes be more challenging for women who are still more likely to be the carers in their family or those that are looking after children, and there's a lot of things to balance. But I think the biggest thing we can do is start to show how women's voice in politics is making a difference, and how important it is that a gender that represents over 50% of our population is making the decisions about this country. Because when we see women in politics, we see some of the best policies, some of the best legacies. And it's not just about women's issues, as people like to say. Women are making big decisions on things like the economy, on healthcare, on schools. So I think it's about showing women that they can do it, building that confidence, because I think that's part of the issue, and how we unpick that. And secondly, about making things a bit more, not fairer is not the right word, but certainly more palatable, so that women feel comfortable and confident entering the world of politics. But so much more needs to be done in this arena.
And I have been in awe with regards to how not just politics was discussed in your household and it was promoted as a major discussion point. That is really good to hear. But on the other hand, for many women from minority ethnic backgrounds, what would be your message?
I remember when I was a child and these conversations used to happen at family events, and for some reason the men used to all go into one room and start talking about politics, and the women used to be in another room talking about other things and all other different matters. And I always used to find that conversation so boring, and I would always want to be in the men's room listening to what they had to say. I think there are generational gaps within our ethnic minority communities. I think certainly from my own personal experiences, I've seen some of our older generation women not necessarily show that interest, and perhaps find that it's often treated as if it's a male's world and they have been told to accept it as a man's world. And that does that does have an impact. I think the younger women are coming through, and I know some very passionate women within the ethnic minority community who are so passionate about wanting to make change. They might not necessarily enter politics, but it's certainly an option. But their voice is something they want heard. And I think that's the big thing we have in ethnic minority communities. And I don't wish to stereotype in any way, but talking about my own experiences, we need to ensure that women feel they have a voice. And sometimes that's not always the case. And a lot of it will come through education. A lot of it will also come through having role models that they can look up to. So the more women that push themselves forward, the more women that say, actually, enough is enough. I don't want the men to be speaking on behalf of me because I have my own voice.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
That is where we will see that change. And the more women they see from a background like mine or yours, I think the easier it will be. And actually we can say to even some of those women from an older generation who have always seen it as a man's world, it's not, and you have a space in it.
Yeah.
I think for me, as a ethnic minority woman politician, I don't wish to be always defined by that, but I also recognise that I have an important role and I want to encourage.
Who in particular would you see as your role model in politics or in general?
This is obviously controversially, my dad is one of my biggest role models because actually the reason why I say that is because ethnic minority men are often seen in a particular way, particularly I had a Muslim dad from a Pakistani background, and in many ways there's an expectation that they have a very traditional expectation about how the world looks and feels. And if we're honest, I probably would have been married off at a young age, had an arranged marriage. My dad wouldn't have encouraged me, but he did all the opposite. And I feel that the reason why I am in the world of politics in the way I am, the way that I am doing the things that I'm doing, are because of people like my dad. And it's so important that men recognise their role in opening up these opportunities for women.
So men are equally instrumental.
I think they are really, really instrumental in changing culture, changing ideas and opening up doors. I know that sounds almost opposite, but for me, I think that's where we do need to do some work. There are some amazing women role models out there. People always talk about the Michelle Obamas of this world and the Hillary Clintons, and they are certainly big, big role models. But one of my favourite politicians of all time was Barbara Castle, and she was this formidable woman who was in a Labour government, ensuring her voice was heard, and she pushed the charge for equal pay. And she was someone who refused to have her voice shut down, despite many men. And let's face it, this isn't just something that we see in ethnic minority communities. Many men trying to tell her she couldn't, and she didn't listen. And for me, she was a maverick, but she was a bit of a rule breaker at times, but actually she was someone who pushed for change.
Yeah. And it is actually people like that that are able to actually bring about structural and systemic changes.
100%.
That is, yeah.
And that's what politics is about, that structural and systemic change.
Excellent. Okay. So there was something else that I wanted to also ask you about, because for many women or girls or young women that may not know about the world of politics, how do they begin, involved in local politics, and what is the journey? What does it look like?
This is a really important question. I think first and foremost, there's a wider point around our political education in this country, because there's just not enough of this in schools where people, and I'm not talking about party politics, but I'm talking about ensuring that people understand and know the democratic structures that exist. So the different layers of government, national government, local government, and how you vote and what your vote means. I think that is a fundamental part of the process, and more of that needs to be happening in schools. I know there are some schools that do very well on this, but actually as a core part of our education system, there are lots and lots of people that you will speak to on the doorstep. I'm sure you've experienced this as yourself. You'll speak to on the doorstep who just don't have that understanding about how their vote matters, what it means, what a council does. And fundamentally, you cannot blame people for that. We have to look at the systems that are in place that are not giving people that kind of understanding. So I think there's some work to do there. I think in terms of women coming forward, first of all, I'd say to any young woman or any girl who's interested in politics, do not lose that passion. I had it from the age of 11, don't lose it. There is a space for you, there is always opportunity for you. I think the first thing to do is sort of decide where your political values sit. So for me that was the Labour Party, but others will take different decisions. And to certainly get in touch with your local party. So have a look on the website, have a look on Twitter and Facebook, join that party if that's the party of your choice, and ask them how you can do more. Now, some of them will have age limits, but within, for instance, the Labour Party, you can join from the age of 14. So there's an opportunity there. And I think the big thing is, you know, if you have ideas about things that you want to do, don't wait to be told to go out and do them.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to change something, find a way to do it. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that don't ask for permission to wait to be told this is how you should go and change your community. You should do that. You know, you can and you should be able to do that on your own accord. In terms of the structures that exist within parties, obviously most parties will have something within your local area where you can get involved, and then there's a more national presence. But locally, getting in touch with local politicians or the local association or the local constituency Labour Party, they will then be able to put you in touch with the right people. And I'd always recommend maybe asking for a mentor, because it can feel like a bit of an alien world.
Yeah.
And I think if you've got someone who can help you unpick that, then that's always a great way to start.
Yeah.
I would always encourage anyone who wants to get involved in Labour politics, even if they wish to. I'm very happy for them to come and speak to me, email me, contact me, Facebook, Twitter, and we can always put them in touch with the right people. But we are a family and we are a friendly bunch of people, so there's always space for more.
That's a really, really positive message, Naushabah. Thank you for that. If you were being very honest, like what
Honest.
what has been the most challenging issue for you?
I've absolutely loved being involved in politics. I joined the Labour Party in 2006, so a very long time ago now, coming up to 16 years of membership, but that hasn't been always smooth sailing. There are always challenges, so I think there are challenges within the party. So we've had periods where we have had people within the party who felt that they could use language, use toxic behaviour in order to create problems internally, and that was a really difficult period of time being a Labour Party member. There is still misogyny, there is still a lot of sexism, at times smatterings of racism, which exists across politics, and the Labour Party is not immune to that. It's often insidious, and often you don't realise it's happening, but you do have to challenge those behaviours. Particularly for me as a woman in politics, I've found that there have been certain comments made about my character or the way I dress, and it's not nice to hear. And even though I have a personality where I'm quite strong-willed and very sort of, some people think that none of that affects me, but of course it affects me. I just deal with it in a different way and more private. It happens to women so often in so many different circles, but I think in politics, because you are so much at the forefront of life, I think those have always been challenging situations. I do think sometimes politics can be one of those places where, probably more so than other careers, it still is a lot about who you know, not what you know.
Right.
And I think that's something we absolutely have to tackle. But I say all of this.
That's sad to hear.
It is, and I think it is sad to hear, and I think it's a real shame that it's still the way it is. Maybe it's the nature of politics, the nature of how it operates, or the stakes that are involved, because they are quite high at times, or the ambitions that people have. Yeah. And there are people tackling that, there are people trying to change that. Yeah. So it's not, I don't want this to sound like a real negative. I think genuinely I wouldn't have been here for 16 years if I didn't enjoy it. I love it. Yeah. But there is a need
for the party to reflect on whether
I think our political culture, not just our party. I mean, as I say, the Labour Party is not immune to this. I don't want to suggest this is a party political issue. It's not. It is something
politics
that exists,
in general.
Our political culture. But it's difficult to see where that change will come from. But I believe our political culture needs to change, and I do think it is one of those arenas where who you know versus what you know is still perhaps proportionally higher than it is in other industries which have tackled it head on.
What have you personally done to counteract that?
So for me, one of the biggest things that I'm passionate about is getting more women involved. So wherever possible, when I meet women who have got something to bring to the party, who are ambitious, they may not have years and years of Labour Party experience, but they have something to bring, they want to change things, they want to be in politics, they want to do good. I really would do anything to support and help them. I'm very happy to be a mentor, but more than that, I'm really happy to unpick the world for them of politics, which can sometimes feel very sort of a little bit kind of the dark arts, a little bit how do we even navigate this. I'm really happy to provide that support, and I have been running training sessions and also a series of sessions where we first met as well. So, I don't know if you were at one of these, but say you want to become a counsellor, and the whole purpose of those is to open up this world to people, so they don't think it's a closed shop, so they do realise there are opportunities, and so that we kind of start to change some of that culture that exists. And actually, I think also talking about it, let's not be afraid to say some of these things, because often what happens is people are ambitious. They get a bit scared that if they start talking up, then they might get shut down, or it might hamper their opportunities in the future, and that bad behaviour then continues.
Yeah, and without acknowledging that there is a problem,
you can never solve it.
Exactly.
So for me, I think being confident and brave enough to speak about it, at probably sometimes a bit of a personal cost, is something I'm happy to do.
From what I'm hearing, it's almost like aimed at bringing forward a positive outcome that benefits the many, right?
Absolutely. I think that our politics really benefits from having strong-minded, passionate women involved in it, and I'm really keen to see more of them, and particularly from ethnic minority backgrounds.
That's really good to hear. I mean, like, looks like you are doing quite a lot from your personal side as well as from your local politics side, like, you know, to encourage more women into, and also you mentioned mentoring, which again is something that maybe if more women are interested in getting in touch with Naushabah to ask questions around how they can be mentored if they are interested in local politics, then that's a really, really positive message, Naushabah. Thank you for that. And bearing in mind that Medway is becoming more diverse, compared to how it used to be, it is gradually becoming more and more diverse. So how do you make sure that you are bringing to the table the voices of many demographic groups within the community?
It's a really important point, and I think it's still a challenge in terms of how we improve diversity across politics. I think, if I'm honest, we have come a long way. And I'm really proud of the group of candidates we've got going forward into the local elections that do reflect that diversity. Now, if we look at it, probably we're never going to be able to reflect every strata of society because it is challenging. But a lot of it comes from, I think, starting to approach communities that are not the same as ours, starting to think about it, starting to ask those questions. The targeted sessions that we did around becoming a counsellor, as an example, there were ones that were targeted at women, but we also did ones targeted at the LGBT community and also those from ethnic minority backgrounds, with that very idea in mind, that actually our politics need to reflect our society, because that's how you get the right decisions. This isn't just tokenism. It's not just getting people in place for the sake of getting people in place to tick a box. That's not what this is about. This is about, what does that mean in the longer term for our communities and our society? And for those reasons, it's so important that our politics reflects that breadth and diversity. There are still problems, and I think we need to be looking at that more. So we tend to still get people who are perhaps had a certain education level, a certain experience in life, normally people that have been to university. So we do need to think about how we change some of that. But in Medway, I do feel we've done a relatively good job, and there's still more to do. And the big thing is working with those communities rather than doing to them. So if there are communities out there that feel they're not represented in politics, please do come and speak to us, because let's see how we can change that.
Thank you, Naushabah. Finally, is there any message that you would like to give to women out there, girls out there, young women out there, to mark the International Women's Day?
Absolutely. The biggest message I would like to give is believe in yourself, because you can do it. And I know, as someone who's had those experiences myself, how often we second guess our abilities, our skills. Trust in yourself, and know that there are people out there that will encourage and support you. And even if it doesn't come necessarily from your family or your friends, there will be people out there who are there for you. And if you want to say something, say it. And I would really encourage girls and women to find their voice and play that role that they want to play, and just have that self-belief they can do it, because I think that is what holds women back.
Thank you. That's a really, really strong and very meaningful message as well.